Hello, my friends. I'm so glad you can be here with me today. I want to share some different experiences that I've had when God spoke to me. As I told you in previous videos, I ended up having 5 sons and 1 daughter. And so I needed to make extra money. So I started throwing the newspaper from 2 a.m. to 6 a.m. That way I could be home with my children, especially my 18-month-old daughter. During this time of throwing the newspaper, I was totally alone. And it was very easy for God to speak to me and for me to hear. Also, I told you that I have always been a very fearful person. And this taught me to have trust in God. This taught me to let go of most of my fears. I had cats jump on me. I had dogs bite me. I had different things happen. But I let go of a lot of my fears. Well, one day I was throwing the newspaper. And I got home and I took in the extra newspapers and put them on my counter. And I am very busy with all of my children. I also have 2 stepdaughters that came to live with me. So in total, I had 8 children. So I never even spent any time looking at the newspaper. I didn't have time for that. And I was in the kitchen and doing things for my kids. And I was about to leave the kitchen. And God told me to look at the newspaper. It was the front page. And on the front page was about a woman who had went in and shot her 9 and 11-year-old sons, murdered them, and then tried to murder herself, but she survived. And she was in the Tulsa jail, which is about an hour and a half from us. And God spoke to me very clearly and said, I want you to go to the Tulsa jail and offer this woman friendship with compassion and understanding. Now, I had never been into a jail at that time. I knew nothing about any of this, and so I just listened to God, and my friend called right after. And I told her what God had just told me. And she said, you can't just walk into a jail and talk to someone that had murdered someone. And I said, oh, okay. Well, I didn't want to go to begin with. I had no desire to go speak to this woman. And then another friend called me and I told her about it. And she said, oh, well, they only have certain visiting days. Now, God had told me to go this coming Saturday. And I go, oh, okay. So I went ahead and called the Tulsa jail, and I asked if I could come up and see this woman. And they said, oh, yeah, you can come up, but we only have 1 day of visitation, and that is Saturday. Well, you can imagine what my husband thought when I went up to him and asked him if he could drive me to Tulsa so that I could speak to this woman who had just murdered her children. He told me absolutely no, and not only did he not want to take me up there, he also did not want me to write her. And if I did, it had to be anonymous. Well, I am not very good at finding my way around other towns. I know my own town and more in Oklahoma City, but I do not do well if I get out of this area. So I needed him to take me. Well, every day that through the newspaper, God told me to go up there Saturday. Every day I would talk to my husband, and every day he would say no. Well, Saturday morning came, and I'm throwing the newspaper, and I told God, I said, God, you know I cannot find my way up there. And my husband is saying no, that he won't take me. And God told me, he said, when you go home, you wake him up and you say these certain words. And so I went home, I obeyed God. I did exactly as God said. And this is 6 o'clock in the morning, and I woke him up. I told him, we went to sleep, and he woke up about 9 o'clock that morning, and he woke me up and said, what time do we need to go to Tulsa? And it's like, oh, wow, okay. And so on that particular Saturday, we had my 4 young children. We had my 18-month-old daughter. We had my 3-year-old son, my 5-year-old son, and my 9-year-old son. And so what was going to happen is when we got up there, I would have to go in, of course, to the jail by myself, and my husband would have to stay in the car with our children. And he did not mind doing this. I want y'all to know this is a miracle to begin with, that he's even willing to take me up there and willing to sit in the car with 4 children. And at that time, we had a very little bitty car. And I think we had a Fiat. And so as we're getting closer to Tulsa, all of a sudden, I got very afraid. It's like, no, God, I don't think I want to talk to her. Now, I imagined this woman to be a big, burly, truck driving looking woman. I don't know why, but that's what I had in my head. And I had nothing to say. The only thing I had to say was what God had told me, that he had sent me to come up there and offer her friendship with compassion and understanding. So as we were getting closer, I started begging God, and I said, God, I'll do some other things for you, but I don't think I want to do this. And I was getting very, very nervous. Well, we got to the Tulsa jail, and I got out, and very anxiously, I walked into the jail. And it was 2 floors, and downstairs, you had to go through metal detectors and all that stuff. So I walk up and I tell them who I am there to see. And they said, oh, you can't see her. She's only allowed 2 visitors per visitation day, and she's already had them. And your name has to be on her list. Well, this woman knew me from absolutely nowhere. I didn't know her. She didn't know me. And so I thought, oh, well, great. I didn't want to go anyway. So I turn around and I start toward the door, and a policeman runs after me and says, wait a minute. You've come a long ways. We're going to go ahead and let you through. And I thought, oh, heck, because I didn't want to go. And so he let me through. I went to the 2nd floor. I had to go through other things. I had to go through another metal detector. I had to go through the other policeman. And God had told me to give her 2 books. And so I had never been to a jail before, so I had these books wrapped like a gift. Well, the policeman walks up to me and he said, you've never been in a jail before, have you? And I said, well, no. And he said, what do you have in that package? And I said, I have 2 Christian books. And he said, You cannot give those to her. He said I said, well, how can I get them to her? And he said, only through the chaplain. And I said, well, could I have his name and number? And he gave it to me. Now, I had to go through a waiting line to put my name down. And so it took 15, 20 minutes. And then they told me that I had to sit down until they called my name. So I went and I sat down, and I'm talking to some other people. And I said, now, how does this work? And they said, well, you're not going to get to see her. They said, you'll be called into this little cubbyhole, and you can talk to her on the phone. And I thought, oh, okay, well, that's okay. So I sat there, and I hate to tell you, I sat there for a long time. And my husband was out there in the car with the children. Finally, they call my name. So I go and I sat down where they tell me to sit down, and I saw the phone. And so I reached for the phone, and I looked through the glass, and lo and behold, this woman was there. I jumped back. I wasn't expecting to see a face. And she was a beautiful, young, blonde-headed woman. She was not anything like in my mind I had imagined. And the only sentence I had was, God has sent me to you and told me to offer you friendship with compassion and understanding. And at that moment, the presence of God hit both of us, and we both started crying. God started talking through me to her, and it was beautiful. It was absolutely beautiful. He told me to tell her that her children throughout eternity would never know what happened to them for them to get to heaven. He also told me to tell her that she could send gifts to heaven, but to them, but to be very careful, because you can spoil your loved ones in heaven just like you can on earth. And if you do, your gifts are not going to have as much meaning. If you just send one gift every now and then, it'll have meaning, but you send gifts every day, it's just not going to have the meaning that it would otherwise. And God told me how to teach her to send the gifts. And what you have to do is say that you want to send a card to your mother on Mother's Day. Well, you have to mentally look over every part of the card that you want to send, or the letter, whatever it is, and you have to visually create it in heaven. If you skip part of it, that part won't be there. It is not something just you can snap your fingers and do. It takes creativity. It takes being very focused. And trying to think of what else. So we chatted, and a friend of mine, before I went to the jail, she had told me, find out what's going to happen to her. Now, this friend was a gossip, and what she wanted was to find out, personally from her what's going to happen to her, so she could, tell other people and be like a gossip. Well, she started to talk about the judge. And when she did, I said, oh, what did the judge say? When that happened, it was like God took a bucket of ice water and threw totally on me. I felt every drop of that ice water. And at that moment, the Spirit of God left me. Until then, the words just flowed because the Spirit of God was on me. But when I asked that particular thing, he threw a bucket of ice water on me. And when that happened and the Spirit left, I didn't know what to say, but they started screaming at me, calling my name. They weren't really nice, and Joe, calling my name, telling me I had been there too long. And so I got up and left, and my husband had been in the car with the children probably 3 hours, a total of waiting and then talking to her. So I went out and I told my husband, and this is before cell phones, I told my husband that I needed to find a payphone to call this chaplain, which I did. And when I called, his secretary said she was just leaving for the day, and I told her what I had. I had 2 books I needed to get to the jail, and she said, well, you're only 2 blocks from me. I'll just meet you and get the books to take to her. So she did, and that was another miracle, because I called him for 4 to 6 weeks every day after, and never once did I get an answer on the chaplain's telephone. So I got in the car and we came back to Oklahoma City. Well, God wanted me to go the next Saturday. Well, after my husband had gone the first time, he didn't mind as much. And so the next Saturday we got ready and we went up there. And I wasn't dreading it, and I didn't have the anxiety that I did have the first time. And she put my name on the list, and so I was able to see her. And when I went in and sat down, and she was sitting in front of me, the Spirit of God was not on me. I didn't have anything to say. And the only thing she really said was, over and over, I wished I had known you before this happened. I wished I had had a friend. And what she was saying is, she wished she had known Jesus. She wished she had had him as a friend. And if she had had a friend who listened to her, maybe this wouldn't have happened. The reason that she ended up murdering her children is because she was going to court on custody with her ex-husband, and she was very sure that she was going to lose, and she felt like she could not live without her children. So she planned to murder them and then kill herself. Well, when her children were sleeping, when she went in with the shotgun and she killed both of them. And then she tried to slash her wrist, and she called 911 just to tell them where to come and get the bodies. Well, they got there before she died and was able to save her life. Now, the Lord did have me tell her on that first visitation that after her children had left their bodies, they were crawling in a tunnel that had very colorful, bright bricks. And the oldest one was in front, and he was crawling, and he turned around, and he looked at the younger one, and they both giggled. They both laughed. And they saw a light at the end of that tunnel, and there was an angel named Elizabeth that greeted them there. So we talked, but the Spirit of God was not there. And I said, God, why? Why did you have me go if you was not going to show up and be there with me? He said, I needed you to understand how in the beginning, some of my children were of me when they started a ministry. But when they got all the adoration from man and all the attention from mankind, and they were idolized, God's work ended for them and man's work began. Because I knew when she was talking to me saying, I wish I had known you before, that if I had told her that day and she was able to jump off of a cliff, she would have done that. I mean, she would have followed me anywhere, only because she had felt the presence of God on that first visitation. So I left that day. The next Saturday, God had me come back, and the Spirit of God was with me. It was a very nice visit. She was a lovely woman. It's just that life had beaten her down. Society had beaten her down. But she seemed like she appeared to be, prior to murdering her children, a good mother. She loved her children. She just didn't feel like she could live without them. So then on the 4th Saturday that God had me go up there, I was in the car, and the Spirit of God was telling me, this won't be good. This won't be good. And I was saying, what do you mean this won't be good? Why am I going if it's not going to be good? But God still directed me to go. So I went, and I put my name down, and they said, she won't see you. She's having some big mental problems, and she doesn't want to see anyone. And I said, would you mind going to tell her my name and that I'm the one from Moore, Oklahoma, and if she doesn't see me, that I won't come back. And so he went and he asked her, he came back and he said, well, she still doesn't want to see you, but I'm going to go ahead and let you come to where she's at. So he let me go into the jail where the bars are. And she came up to me, and she was mentally in a very bad state. What was happening is her mother was having appeared to be like a nervous breakdown. And of course, her daughter had just murdered her 2 grandchildren. Of course, a mother cannot handle something like that. And she just didn't, mentally, she just didn't want to be there. And I tried to help her. I didn't feel that the Spirit of God was on me, telling her anything. I just felt like it was my humanness and that it was pointless because I really wasn't giving her any help. So I got up and I left. And so before the next Saturday, I called up there, and they had moved her to the Veneta prison, which at that time, this is 1989, at that time, it was a prison for the criminally insane. I wrote her one time after this, and she never returned my letter. So that was the end of this story. The next story I would like to tell you is when I was throwing the newspaper, there was a man, and he was in a wheelchair, and he would always come out of his apartment. It was an apartment complex that I was throwing the newspapers in. And he would come out of his apartment with his trash sack on his lap. And no, I'm sorry, that's not the way it is. He would come out of his apartment, and he had set the trash sack out the night before. And so he would pick up the trash sack. He would wheel himself over to the trash bin. He would throw it away, and then he would go and he would sit by the curb for his ride. Well, one time it had snowed and it was icy, and he got stuck. His wheelchair got stuck. So, of course, I'm right there. I went over and I helped him get unstuck. And at that time, the route that I had, there was a young woman that complained on me almost every other day because I would have her newspaper to her about 6:03, 6:05, and I was supposed to have everything done by 6 a.m., and she would complain on me. And so I was very rushed in this apartment complex so this woman wouldn't complain on me. So one day I'm going through the apartment, and God said, I want you to take his trash out for him every day before he comes out of his apartment. And I said, now God, I am very, very busy. I'm getting complaints. I really don't want to do this. And God said, you have legs, you know. Well, when God said that, I started throwing this young man's trash away before he came out of his apartment. He never knew who was throwing his trash away. I just did it. I actually changed my route so this woman would quit complaining on me, and I threw his trash out like an hour before he actually came out to go to work. And I always considered these I call them my trash blessings. I always considered these trash blessings my most precious blessings because it was done anonymous, and no, I never told anyone in my family, friends, no one that I was doing this. This was a secret between me and God. So I always considered them my trash blessings. I will explain to you in the next video about God asking me to give away my trash blessings, which I did not want to do. I just want each and every one of you to know that I appreciate you being here. It means a lot to me, and that I pray that God will just rain upon you all of his blessings, and that you have an absolutely wonderful day. I will see you next time. Goodbye.